Hey friends, just a little addendum that I want to add on to our video about attachment. I spent some time talking about the different styles of attachment, and in rewatching that in order to get ready for uploading, I found a few errors, 3 errors. The first is that I didn't properly introduce the concepts of attachment theory as explained by Mary Ainsworth based on the work of John Bowlby. So I'm going to enter that into the show notes below so that you can see what that is, and also a link to what's called the strange experiment. And then the second thing, the most notable one, is as I was kind of going on at a mad rate and got into my little zone of talking to you, I labeled. It's kind of a big one, so I don't know. I'm thinking maybe I have to re-record it, but I don't wanna. So if you think I need to, just tell me in the notes below, and put it in the comments if you think I need to re-record it. But right there at the very beginning, I get into secure attachment, and then I go into the second style, and I labeled that as anxious attachment, and then I went on to describe what avoidant attachment is. Part of that is, well, here's my excuse for that. I wasn't paying attention. It's probably my biggest excuse. But secondarily, I'm not, see? Now more mistakes. I don't even have my mic close to my mouth. Secondarily, what's I going to say? I lost the thought. It's coming back. Oh. So there's a couple of things with this sort of labeling that we use. And I use very simple language to talk about the attachment style. Secure, avoidant, anxious, and disorganized. 4 types. And I use very specifically, very basic language. The thing is that it's actually got more complicated language around it for very good reasons. I don't even have an argument with the way that it's put together. The people who have researched this really know their stuff, and attachment work has only really been explored in our field in the last 70 years or something. It's relatively new. Of course, all of psychotherapy is new compared to some of our other things that we've learned as a species, as the human condition is explored. Attachment theory is like newer on the list, but as you can see, I'm a fan of attachment theory. Most of my work is based around attachment work. So anyway, the people who've done the research have done an outstanding job, and there are different labels. For simplicity, I do boil it down. For simplicity, for my own understanding and also for yours, I boil it down to secure, avoidant, anxious, and disorganized. 4 attachment styles. There are 4 attachment styles. It's just that there's different language around it, as like it's ambivalent anxious attachment, and I have trouble grasping that, and I don't think you need to know that in order to understand what's happening physiologically, which is the point that I'm getting at. I mean, I want to be correct as well, but I don't think it's the part that you need to know. If you're like a researcher, don't use my videos as a source of your information. Like, get the Bowlby information, get the Ainsworth information, get the data on the strange situation. Like, don't use me. But for understanding, because if we could kind of get, that's that. You can imagine, say I'm sitting in a session and we're working on something, and the language that I will use and the language that my client will use is, that's that avoidant part of me, or that's that anxious part of me, or there's my disorganized attachment. Like, we need the shorthand language to be able to work through the processes. So if you are, so I'll go with me. I have an primarily avoidant attachment style. Sometimes anxious, but that's a new one that's coming out. Primarily the way that I am oriented in relationship, I have an avoidant attachment style. So that's just a shorthand I will use. Like, there's the avoidant part of me. I'm not trying to like stay avoidant in my important relationships. I want to be able to deal with what's coming up for me as somebody who recognizes their avoidant self. Like, I want to use that shorthand to kind of, okay, and because I'm feeling this way, I want to empathize with myself, care for myself. Oh, that's bringing out my avoidant attachment style. But I don't want to just be like, okay, and therefore all the world should revolve around me and my attachment style. No, like, we have more responsibility than that. What am I going to do with that? Okay, so that's one reason, one explainer of why I think I messed it up. That's the second one. The first one was I may have not been paying attention, and I may have thought of going out of order than I normally talk about it. And then the second one is that the language isn't actually consistent from the way I'm explaining it in terms of how we get to know ourselves and what you might be working on with a clinician. I'm a very clinical, like, how does this show up clinically rather than theoretically? So you will notice some language difference on that. And then the third reason, and this is kind of an important one that I also wanted to add into the addendum, is that there's sort of attachment style as identified in children. The ones that I'm exploring is how it's identified in children. There's actually if you were avoidant attachment as a child, you're going to be X as an adult. There's a whole other thing that happens. Here's what I think it is. Specifically on this one. Secure attached, you're going to be securely attached. But if you were avoidant, you can be dismissing. So let me explain that. For example, if you have an avoidant attachment style as a child, you have learned to kind of just tuck it away, bury it, be in denial about it, whatever language you want to use for that, and focus on making sure the environment makes you safe. So I'm gonna not know that I have needs. I'm not gonna put a voice to my needs. I'm not going to count on others to attend to those needs. I'm not going to experience satisfaction, relaxation, and trust through the experience of my needs. In fact, I'm probably going to rely heavily on myself, not trust other people, not use a voice, maybe not even understand that I have needs. That is sort of the profile of avoidant attachment as a child. And the profile as an adult, there's an adult version, there's an adult label. There's an adult label. And that's dismissing. It's the dismissing attachment style. So this is just like more of an explainer of, I think, why I got hung up on the words. The dismissing comes from, like, if I've learned to cope my whole life from the time of infancy by kind of shutting down my own needs, my own voice, my own expectation of other people wanting or capable of meeting those needs. And then I become a parent myself, I probably will be dismissing to my kiddos because, well, maybe not me because I've done a lot of work in this area, but like somebody who hasn't done their work might be like, not know that things are hidden or that there's another way to do things. And so they could be like, here's a dismissing comment. You don't have anything to cry about. Right? Or if they say like, I don't feel like you love me. Well, I do. So get over it. Right? That would be a dismissing. That's not great parenting. So try not to say those things to your kids, but you know what I'm saying? Like, that label of avoidant becomes a label of dismissing in the adult version of attachment issues. I feel like that's really a point that only matters to clinicians and not to people who are just trying to work on the behaviors that come up. Because the behavior of being avoidant or dismissing to, let's say, in your love relationship or in your parenting relationship has, that kind of behavior will show up when you're in distress and also isn't probably good for the other person that you're trying to build a relationship with. So it's worth unpacking and knowing about yourself, obviously. Okay, and then the third thing is, okay, so I kind of talked about like why people might be avoidant or might be anxiously attached, but I didn't talk about the why with disorganized attachment, and it's an important one. all right, who am I kidding? It's all very important. To me, it's all very, very important. But in this particular area, what's important is with disorganized attachment, what leads to a disorganized attachment is it's pretty sad. So remember when I was talking about in the attachment description that there's a strategy, like a secure attachment, an infant with secure attachment, let's say a 1-year-old with secure attachment, knows how to get their needs met. I'm going to use my voice, and I'm going to lean to my my important caregiver, and they're going to help me regulate my little system, and then I'm going to experience satisfaction, relaxation, and I'm going to trust all of that whole thing, right? There's a strategy in place of how to get my needs met. Usually with an infant, it's crying. With a 1-year-old, it might be like walking over and reaching for a hug, or, motioning to pick me up, or whatever that behavior might be. There's a strategy with an anxiously attached person. See, now I'm going to get myself confused because I'm talking about anxious as the second thing. Anxiously attached is, while I've got you here, this is my strategy. While I've got you here, I'm going to keep on having some problems because you've been not necessarily present. And so I've had a lot of things that haven't been attended to. So while I've got you, this might be like, classically is like somebody with PTSD or depression, where they come into sort of like responsive parenting, but then, like if they've had a trauma trigger, that might go away. They might be too triggered to attend to the kiddo. Or like a depressed parent, like a depressed person isn't depressed 100% of the time. And when they're not depressed, they're probably a great parent. Or I guess the converse is true, although I haven't experienced that, but could be. But it's intermittent. It's not like same, right? And we don't need 100% same, but we need really predictive care, especially when we're small. So that's sort of the cause of anxious. The cause of avoidant, and also I haven't seen the research on what causes avoidant, but I think it often comes from your own childhood trauma and developing a strategy of like putting away the neglect, like an alcoholic parent or a neglectful parent, or some other kinds of traumas where you weren't able to get support from a caregiver, and you've just learned to deal with it yourself. That would be like a cause of having an avoidant attachment. Or somebody who's so dysregulated. This is why I spend a lot of time thinking about like parents who have unresolved trauma and are from their own neglectful or harmful upbringing, sometimes have learned to care for the parent. You might call it parentified. So let me try to get more specific. Classic example. A child who is raised with a parent who has a substance abuse issue. The child needs that parent to be somewhat functional, and so they become a little bit parentified. But also psychologically, you're very focused on what are the triggers for that substance use. What is the emotional trigger that sends this person away from me? The child becomes very focused on not distressing, not being a source of distress, and is very aware, even at a very young age, that like their needs and their voice might be triggering to that parent. So they will learn very, very quickly, in order to keep getting their needs met, right? The organism does what the organism is going to do to get those needs met. If the best way that I can get those needs met is by focusing on taking care of my parent, okay, then that's what I'm doing. Like, it's a strategy is the point. It's a strategy. The fourth category is that disorganized attachment style. And the disorganized attachment style, the hallmark of that is there's no strategy, which is terrifying. What is the cause of that? Sadly, it is harmful parenting. So the parent is the source of harm or is being harmed. So some examples of that would be abusive parenting, or like purposely neglectful, not the same as like depressive neglectful, but like malicious. I don't think there's a DSM phrase for this, but like sort of maliciously neglectful, like I don't want to take care of you, like I'm kind of despise you, that kind of thing would lead to a disorganized attachment style. Or somebody who's like very fearful of their own well-being. So a classic example of that would be like domestic violence in a home with severe domestic violence. So it's either a person who is being harmed or a person who's experiencing a lot of harm. The child who's being raised by that person is probably going to have a lack of strategy of how to get those needs met. So you might see them kind of bouncing around between the behaviors that sort of are indicative of an anxious attachment style or an avoidant attachment style. But the point is, it generally looks bizarre. You're like, I don't even understand why you're behaving like that. If you have that feeling, I guess as a clinician, if you're like, ooh, that doesn't quite add up, that approach to getting your needs met is odd, it might really be a sign of a disorganized attachment. It's really so distressing inside of that little infant or that young child, or as an adult, it's so distressing to not be able to get a hold of a strategy to make yourself feel better. It's terrifying. It will flip your lid. It will trigger your limbic system to be in fight or flight, and it looks bizarre. It looks unusual. It's not congruent. It's like there's no logic to the behavior. I don't know. A lot of our behaviors defy logic, so I wouldn't say that's the only parameter, but yeah. So I guess the main point was that I wanted to sort of add an addendum as sort of a correction of in this, we'll just call this attachment theory part 2, which has my corrections. Sorry about that. And then a little bit of additional information about that disorganized attachment style, because I feel like we probably need to be more aware of what that is and what is the cause of that. So I'll catch you on the next one.